Drinking buddies, it's time for a whiskey special. It's time to talk about allocated bourbon and what are 6 allocated bottles of bourbon that I've landed that I actually think are worth hunting for.
I'm your drinking buddy.
So drinking buddies, if you're new to whiskey, you might be thinking, what do you mean allocated? What does it mean when they say allocated? Well, they can only make a certain number of bottles, and so therefore they limit how many bottles a retailer can order. So some retailers might get a lot, some retailers might get a little, some states might get a lot, some states might get 0. And so therefore there's a few bottles that you should probably just be on the lookout for all the time. I would say that when I'm talking about allocated bourbons, a few of the ones that come to mind specifically first are going to be those Buffalo Trace Mash Bill 2 single barrels, so things like Blanton's and Elmer T. Lee. But I'm not going to include those in my list because they are a little overrated. I don't want to say that because I think at this point there's actually been a blowback and now all of a sudden Blanton's might be underrated because everyone likes to trash on it. But it's probably the best of these single barrels. I also have the Elmer T. Lee here, but there's also Hancock Reserve and Rock Hill Farms. And for me, the Rock Hill Farms is probably my least favorite of the 4. I know that sounds crazy, but you know, these single barrels can differ from batch to batch. And the one that I got was so loaded with tobacco and mint flavored, it almost tasted like I was drinking chewing tobacco. I was not a fan of the Rock Hill Farms I tried. Now that might be different in another batch, and I'm not here to trash a bottle. If you had it and you love it, great, be on the hunt for it. But you know, for me, Rock Hill Farms was my least favorite of the 4. But if you see these in the wild, more power to you if you want to jump on them. I just feel like the other bottles I'm going to highlight here are better. Another example of something that, you know, if you see it in the wild, you probably want to pick it up, but I'm not highlighting specifically today. It's going to be, you know, your standard Weller Special Reserve. I have a 175 of it here, so it was about 40 bucks. Weller Special Reserve, you see it in the wild, you probably want to buy that. I'm going to begin with number 6, and I think this is a bottle that you should be hunting for at all times, and that is Early Times Bottled in Bond. Now, I did talk about this in a previous episode when I highlighted 10 bottles of whiskey you should try before you die, and I still hold true to that because I feel like this is the daily sipper to end all daily sippers. It's under $25 and it's fantastic. It's for a 1 liter, it's under $25. And yeah, if you see this one in the wild, you pick it up immediately. It was recently acquired by Sazerac, so now that means it's probably going to end up as heavily allocated as some of the Buffalo Trace items, since Buffalo Trace is owned by Sazerac. We don't know what it'll taste like once they take over it. They say they're not going to change it all, but you know, it's already hard to find now. It's probably only going to get worse. Early Times Bottled in Bond, number 6. So for number 5, I'm going to go ahead and say Colonel E.H. Taylor. Anytime you see this particular bottle on the shelf at a store, you buy it. Specifically, I'm talking about the small batch, but I would say this goes for any of their offerings. You see a single barrel, you see a, you know, a warehouse C, you just happen to see a warehouse C on the shelf, you buy that immediately. Obviously, I'm being a little facetious here when I talk about the warehouse C, since some of the retail locations that were selling that were selling it for over $5,000 a bottle. We're talking about a bottle that retailed at $100. So obviously, things are getting crazy when it comes to allocations. You can't really trust what one retailer is charging versus the next retailer. But if it's at retail, here, the ultimate suggestion I have for you is the Booze app. So go ahead and download the Booze app, and it'll tell you what what the bottle should cost at retail, what it's a fair price for it, and that is voted on by us, the people who own the app. And then also a shelf price, and that shelf price is what it is being sold for on secondary markets at the moment. And oftentimes that secondary market price is a little low. But the cool thing about something like E.H. Taylor here is you can take that bottle and you can say, you know what, that's worth the price that people are paying for it. And you can hit, is that a fair price? You hit yes, it'll go up a little bit. You say, no, it's not a fair price, it'll go down a little bit. And so we as bourbon lovers can hold each other accountable through the Booze app, and we can figure out what is a fair price to pay for these bottles. So I recommend the Booze app, and I definitely recommend buying any bottle of E.H. Taylor you come across. So for number 4, we're going to talk about Weller Bullproof. I know I just talked about the Weller Special Reserve, but specifically highlighting the Bullproof because it is at retail about a $50 bottle. It is wonderful. And unfortunately, some liquor stores are charging $800 for this thing. Is it a great bottle for $50? You betcha. Is it a great bottle for $800? No way. I would be so angry if I paid $800 for this. I would be crying in my boots. I don't own boots, but you got the idea. This is a wonderful bottle for $50. Might even be worth it at $100. I know I'm doubling the price, but I just feel like it's a foolproof offering. Booker's is $100. This is better than Booker's. For number 3, I'm going to talk about Elijah Craig Toasted Barrel. I really like this offering from Elijah Craig. Everything they do is really solid. But specifically the Toasted Barrel and their barrel proof offerings, retail between $70 and $80. And, a $10 to $20 markup on those wouldn't be outrageous. If you saw this bottle for $100, I don't think that would be outrageous. If you saw their barrel proof offerings for $90, I don't think that would be outrageous. I probably wouldn't pay more than the standard retail price for either of these bottles, but I do recommend hunting for them because they are really solid. They are really good. And if you don't already own a bottle, it is something to add to your collection for sure. Let's try a little bit. 94 proof. So it is going to be a small batch bourbon done the standard way, but then finished in toasted new oak barrels. So it's a double oaked bourbon. And when I say toasted, they're really charring that inside of that barrel. It's gonna have a really heavy char on it. So it should really pick up a lot of extra smokiness. It should pick up a lot of extra char flavor from the barrel, and we should get a really smooth, really solid bourbon out of the extra toasting process. And we do. It goes down so insanely smooth. It is really flavorful with oak and cinnamon, and there's a little bit of peanut in there, but it's subtle. It's not an overpowering peanut. Elijah Craig Toasted Barrel. That was number 3. And for number 2, I'm gonna recommend that anytime you see any of these Wild Turkey Master's Keep bottles, I would go ahead and recommend buying one. Now I know the price point on these is pretty darn high, but if you see one in the wild, they're pretty darn rare. They're pretty low. There's a very small amount of them made each year, and each product is known to be just fantastic. So a few of the offerings they've done recently, this Decades I got last year. They did a 17-year bottled in bond offering, and this year's offering is going to be a toasted barrel rye offering, and it sounds fantastic. So I'm gonna be on the lookout for that one, and I think you should too. Anytime you see these Wild Turkey Master's Keeps bottles out there, they're worth buying. Unfortunately, they're pretty pricey, but they're so good. I trust the Russells to deliver me something fantastic if they're gonna put that high of a price point on it. Considering they sell me Wild Turkey 101 for $18, and they sell me Russell's Reserve 10 for $30. And those bottles are fantastic and easy to find. If they're gonna put this high of a price point on something, you know it's gonna be good. And my number 1, the bottle you should be hunting for all the time. You probably saw this one coming. This is probably the number 1 on several people's lists, but Stag Jr. is a phenomenal bottle. I love this bottle. I think it's the best barrel proof bourbon I've ever tasted. It retails for around $50. Booker's is $100. This bottle could easily cost $100, and I don't think it would be overpriced. If I saw one sitting on a liquor store shelf for $100, I would buy it. Don't think I would pay more than $100 for it, but if I saw this on the shelf at a liquor store, $100, I would do it. Now, chances are pretty good if it's sitting on the shelf at a small liquor store, it's $250, but we're not getting into semantics here. We're just talking about what I would pay for the bottle, and I would pay $100 for Stag Jr. all day. The first time I ever had it was a pour in Galveston, Texas, and I believe I paid almost $40 for just a pour. So, and that place was fantastic. I loved the environment. It was definitely worth the pour. I would have paid $40 for a pour of that just to enjoy such a great bartender, owner, awesome story with fantastic food. But, you know, $40 for a pour when a bottle costs $50 just tells you how much this allocation process has really just driven up the prices of this stuff. You know, this is one that I have seen posted on Reddit, in liquor stores, sitting on the shelf for over $300. And it just kind of blows my mind because I feel like this is one that if you love bourbon, you should be able to walk into a store and buy it. Because it is one of the best bourbons you'll ever taste. You see Stag Jr. on the shelf, you buy it. Well, drinking buddies, I could really use your help reacting to this. So if you liked my suggestions, you liked my list, give me a like. If you hate my list, give me a dislike. I want to see if this helps me get more likes/views. So it would really be helpful to me and my channel if you could just go ahead and tell me whether or not you liked my choices or not. Please tell me if you didn't. Cheers.